all of you are aware, Turkey have sent tanks and also artillery troops into the border of Syria. Many are wondering what this would mean. Is this going to be a game changer in the overall situation regarding Syria? Let's go to Mr. Aliriza first.
I don't think so. I think it's a limited operation, excuse me, primarily against the town of Jarablus, which the IS, Islamic State, has held for at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, right on the border. And you know, apparently Jarablus is being evacuated by ISIS, was being evacuated even before the Turkish intervention. Now, where it might become a possible game changer is if the goals of the operation are expanded to include the Kurdish forces who've been allied with the United States. They recently took Manbij. Turkey has said that they need to evacuate the areas west of the Euphrates, as the U.S. has apparently promised Turkey. The U.S. is in a difficult position on this issue, and as your lead-up suggested, there are lots and lots of other problems associated with the post-coup situation. So Biden is no doubt talking about this, as well as all the other aspects that you touched on.
All right. We're not just yet talking about Mr. Biden's trip. Let's focus still on the recent incidents of Turkish troops moving into the Syrian border. Mr. Sedney, from your perspective, what would happen? Is this only targeting at the ISIS, or this is also targeting at Kurdish forces? Some of those are being supported, or at least allies of the United States.
I agree those are important issues, but more importantly, this is Turkey going into Syria. And I agree with Bulent Aliriza that's a limited operation, but it will be very interesting to see how long it extends for. Because the real issue here for Turkey is the future of Syria and the future of the Bashar Assad government. And that is an area where, despite the recent meeting between Putin and Erdogan, where Russia and Turkey have had very different long-term strategic objectives. Turkey has been very strong in the idea that you need to get rid of the Bashar Assad government, and has been concerned about the consequences of not doing so. So I think this, I agree this is a limited operation. I think that it could have long-term consequences if Turkish forces stay for a long period of time.
Yeah, what is long period of time according to you, sir?
A long period of time would be 6 months, a year, 2 years.
I see. Having said that, though, let's go to Mr. Cleppe. This is happening all at an interesting time. Of course, you're observing from Europe. Europe has expressed its understanding, NATO has expressed its understanding of Turkey to deal with the Kurdish side of its problem. And yet, when you see that Turkish forces coming into Syria, the country itself, will that further complicate the issue? How much will NATO, will European countries be able to sit there on their hands when Turkey are coming into Syria?
Europe has some understanding for the Turkish position. The Turkish actions clearly are the consequence of the latest terrorist attack, which has been blamed on ISIS. Now, one problem is indeed the fact that almost the whole border with Turkey is now under control of Kurdish forces in Syria, and Joe Biden just said that these Kurdish forces need to withdraw and stay in the east. Now the question is, will they do that? But it's clear that they do not have the support of the United States to stay in certain areas where they are currently staying. So there is some common ground there between the United States and Turkey.
Mr. Sedney, may I also have your opinion about the timing of this so-called sending tanks into Syria by Turkey? This is exactly coincides with the visit of the Vice President, Mr. Joseph Biden, from the United States. He is, by the way, the first Western country leader into the country of Turkey after the coup, which has been accused by some in the West and not necessarily dealt very well by the Turkish president. And this also coincides with not long after the Turkish president visited Moscow and certainly had a great deal of talk with the Russian president. What do you make of this timing? What does that mean when it comes to the cards that Ankara wants to show to Washington?
My reading of the timing is that it's a very clear message from the Turkish government that Turkey will put its own interests first. Turkey has been restrained about going into Syria before, asking for the U.S. to provide air cover and no-fly zone, various other requests to work together. But this time, Turkey is clearly acting on its own, defending its own interest, and I think that message goes beyond just this incursion, that Turkey will put its own interest ahead of others.
But things are getting complicated, Mr. Aliriza, like it or not. We have already heard protests coming from the Syrian government, I mean the Syrian administration and regime at this moment about the Turkish recent movement. So will that lead to further spark between these two countries, and will that also further complicate the already devastating situation?
Well, it was complicated before. It's going to get even more complicated. Now, the Syrian government has formally complained about the Turkish incursion into Syria. Of course, it has no control over that area that Turkey has gone into. So this is a pro forma statement that I don't think one should pay much attention to. Now, more important is the response of the Syrian Kurds. Salih Muslim of the Syrian Kurdish leadership has actually condemned it, and President Erdogan in his speech today responded to Muslims' comment, saying that wait until you see what's going to happen to you. So what we should keep an eye on is this triangular relationship between Ankara, Washington, and the Syrian Kurds. Now, the Syrian Kurds have been an ally of the United States as they moved against ISIS targets in the north, and the new commander of the anti-ISIS operations for the U.S., General Townsend, yesterday commented that the Syrian Kurds were great allies, and he expected to move with them, with U.S. Special Forces assisting them on the ISIS capital of Raqqa. Now, what does this Turkish incursion, which might expand into an assault on the Kurdish forces west of the Euphrates, mean for the Obama administration's goal of defeating ISIS and taking over their capital? Obviously, this is the kind of thing that the U.S. and Turkey will talk about in the days and weeks to come.
Mr. Aliriza, I want to follow up a little bit, because we've also been hearing from the Turkish side responding to the Syrian protest that it is talking about the territorial integration of Syria is going to be extremely important for Turkey. How should we understand this, by the way?
This is a code word for Turkish opposition to the establishment of a Kurdish belt across the Turkish-Syrian border. Most of that area below the Turkish border is controlled by the Kurds. It's only the 96 kilometers, the so-called Manbij Gap, which was not controlled by the Kurds. The Kurdish incursion, backed by the United States, west of the Euphrates, which got them to Manbij, has closed off that area, preventing jihadists from going in and from going out. And that was a prelude to an attack on Raqqa. Now, the Turkish government is saying that it's intervening in order to protect the territorial integrity of Syria. Syria is complaining about this, but it's really the Kurds, the Syrian Kurds, and the United States who should be concerned about what exactly it is that Turkey wants to do there.
Right, what exactly Turkey wants to do, and also how does it want to do it? Mr. Sedney, one of the things we mentioned earlier is Turkey's recent approach to Moscow, and it seems to be much friendlier than it used to be. Certainly also get certain consent coming from Moscow as well. So, do you think Turkey can play to the United States the double cards? One is approach to Washington ever closer, or approach to Moscow ever closer? How will Washington, at this election season, going to make its choice?
Well, I think there may be some element of that great power politicking that you discussed. I think it has much more to do with the situation in Syria. The Russian ability to act in Syria is something that could endanger Turkey's interest. And if Turkey and Russia have come to some kind of agreement about Turkey's actions, both the current ones and potential future ones, that will give Turkey a much freer hand. Of course, there is this broader geopolitical kind of game playing that you mentioned going on, but I think it's secondary to the immediate tactical interest of Turkey in ensuring Russia does not support the Syrian government's objection to this alleged infringement on Syria's territorial integrity.
Mr. Aliriza, I want to come back to you. Do you think Ankara can play that card well, or is it going to bring more fire onto its own land?
Very difficult to play this this hand in a way that does not offend Turkey's main ally, the United States. I think the Europeans are less important from Ankara's point of view. It's really Washington that the message, the visit to St. Petersburg and the meeting with Putin was addressed to. Now, I agree with David Sedney that there are fundamental differences between Turkey and Russia when it comes to Syria. Turkey wants Assad out, and Moscow, together with Tehran, are the two capitals that have made sure that that Assad stays in office. Now, you know, can those differences be bridged? You know, Russian planes have been bombing Turkish opposition-backed groups in Syria, in Idlib province. At some stage, those differences will have to be eradicated. Now, there may be tactical agreements when it comes to the Kurds that Assad, in spite of his statements, might agree to. But frankly, it's too early to tell. And ultimately, Turkey will remain a member of NATO, it will remain an ally of the United States. It will play the Russian card, but without endangering those.
Well, we'll see whether that would happen. But the thing is, Mr. Cleppe, what is the most important focus for Turkey now? Is it going to be about Assad, which has been the focus at the very beginning? Or is it going to be of the Kurdish forces, which Turkey has always considered as one of its biggest challenges? So it really depends on which focus they are going to have for the short term in the near future, isn't it, Mr. Cleppe?
Turkey is definitely more concerned about the Kurdish forces than about Assad. There's already been noises in the Turkish government to sort of stop saying that Assad must go. This all fits in the grand movement that we're seeing, where there is a rapprochement between Russia and the West, the lifting of the sanctions against Iran. So if all these power players in the Middle East could come together, then it will probably be much more easier to tackle the problem of ISIS.
Having said that, what about Turkey's relations with the rest of NATO and also with the European countries? Turkey, of course, apparently has been shouldering quite some responsibilities when it comes to these immigrants, if I could use the word, or refugees, and also has been playing a role of sitting in between Europe and the rest of the troubled regions. How much does Europe still value Turkey? And what about Turkey's recent moves these days? Will that in any way influence Brussels and the European capitals' thinking and analysis about Ankara?
Well, Turkey is still strategically very important for Europe, but the problem is, I think, that in the past promises have been made that are frankly unsustainable to keep. There is no political consensus in Europe to allow visa-free travel for Turkish people into Europe, for example. There's also very little political support for Turkish EU membership, at least in the next 10 to 15 years. So probably the wisest thing to do is to be more honest with Turkey, to state that European countries definitely want to remain allies, but that doesn't have to mean having Turkey in the European Union. So I would not be surprised if in the next few years we will see movement in that direction.
All right, Mr. Sedney, we have to mention this because with the visit of Vice President Biden to Turkey, many have been looking at the possibility of extradite the cleric Gulent. Of course, originally coming from Turkey, also was being considered as an enemy of President Erdogan. What do you think the United States might do? Earlier, U.S. was quite reluctant to do that.
Well, the United States is a country of laws and rules, and those laws and rules will be followed. The United States system does not allow the President of the United States to order the immediate extradition of somebody based upon the demand of another country's leader. It has to go through a legal process. The United States in recent days has clearly signaled to Turkey that it wants to work with Turkey on the legal process, dispatching groups from the Department of Justice to Turkey to work with them through the existing mechanisms. But it's not going to be fast. The U.S. system of justice and its appeal process make it more likely than not that this will be a long-standing, continuing area of disagreement as the legal process goes forward. And I really can't predict how the legal process will end up. But I think it's very unlikely to be able to satisfy the Turkish government, the Turkish people, and most of all, Mr. Erdogan.
I see. We got 30 seconds left only, so may I have one sentence only from every one of you helping us to understand what should be the factors that we should watch very closely when it comes to the latest with the nature of Turkey and, of course, of the region. Mr. Aliriza, one sentence from you, sir.
Well, I think we can predict more surprises and more changes in Turkish foreign policy in the geopolitical picture.
All right. Mr. Cleppe.
I would say watch the U.S. presidential election. I think that could be a game changer.
All right. And Mr. Sedney. Yes, Mr. Sedney.
I think the long-term strategic interest of Turkey and the United States in maintaining a very good relationship continue, but there are many minefields ahead.